Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So I thought we'd do something interesting today and try a throwback episode. So when I say a throwback episode, what I mean is I picked a random year and I'm going to talk about the things that we as nerds were excited about in that year. So tonight we're doing the year 2000, the new millennium. So I'm going to start right at the top of the list here. One of the things we were very much looking forward to, and I know I was as a fan, and I'm pretty sure the rest of you all were as well, was X-Men getting its own film. We had seen trailers, we had heard great things. Bryan Singer was kind of doing a raw, different kind of take on the X-Men as a superhero team. And I gotta say, getting to sit in the theater, looking back on it now, is it the best X-Men movie? Not at all. Does that mean at the time my mind wasn't blown? No. I mean, my mind was blown by this movie. I mean, it was amazing not only to see Wolverine and Cyclops and Jean and Storm and these characters that I had come to love so much in the comic books finally on screen, but taken seriously and shown in a light that for the first time showed audiences that superhero movies could be taken seriously, that superhero movies could be, just as engaging as any other type of movie. They weren't just for fans of the comic world, they were for everybody. There was a lot of unknowns about it. The casting of Wolverine changed midway through the production. Dougray Scott was originally supposed to play Wolverine, but he had scheduling conflicts with the shooting of Mission Impossible 2 at the time, and had to back out of the role at the last minute, and Hugh Jackman was brought in to replace him. And at the time, I mean, Hugh Jackman was still a relatively unknown actor in the States. I mean, he had done work in Australia and gotten some notice there, but we really didn't know who he was, let alone could he, pull off the complexity that is Wolverine as a character. But I gotta say, he stands out as one of the shining moments from that film. And it is a little ironic that come full circle, his story still, resonates as one of the best stories that they've told throughout these films. Another huge get for them was getting Patrick Stewart to come play Professor Xavier. That had always been something that whenever we, myself and my friends had conversations about who should play these characters in a movie, there was no doubt in any of our minds that Patrick Stewart was the man for the job when it came to Professor Xavier. He had an eloquence to him, and coming off of the success of Star Trek: The Next Generation and the various movies that they had made from that, I mean, he just really was the guy for the job, and it worked perfectly. And you can't have a good Professor Xavier without a good Magneto for him to play off, and bringing in Ian McKellen. Amazing. I mean, the weight and the gravitas that he brings to the role of Magneto was just exactly what we as fans had always thought, about how Magneto should be portrayed on screen, and the respect and the power that he has within him. So all of these things came together, really to show what was at the time, again, something that blew our minds. Something that we were very excited to see sequels of. And I mean, look, here it is, 2018, and we're still doing X-Men movies. Their staying power cannot be doubted. They've had their bumps in the road. X-Men 3 and X-Men Origins Wolverine are two examples of, X-Men movies that have faltered. But overall, obviously audiences still enjoy the plight of the mutants, and enjoy seeing them on screen time and time again. So we'll see what X-Men Dark Phoenix will bring us this year. Going over into the world of comics, for me, just Marvel had announced in the late 1999 time, maybe early 2000s, that they were going to create a brand new universe, the Ultimate Universe. And if you're unfamiliar with what the Ultimate Initiative was, it was a way to build continuity again from the ground up, and have it be, set in the modern world. So the watching Peter get bitten by the spider, watching the X-Men come together as a team, these were the things they were promising us. And as a kid who enjoyed reading comics, A part of me was always sad that I never got to experience the beginning in the '60s, when X-Men and Spider-Man and these characters first, popped up in the pages of Marvel Comics. So this was an unprecedented opportunity to get in on something from the ground up, at the ground floor, and be able to enjoy the building of these stories without the continuity that the regular Marvel universe, had to keep moving forward with. And I gotta say, Ultimate Spider-Man came out in late 2000 by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley, and it just blew me away. I mean, I had never been a huge fan of Spider-Man as a character, but this was a Spider-Man written for me as a teenager. First of all, he was written as a teenager. He was in high school, so he was dealing with the same kind of things that we all deal with, and trying to fit in and trying to meet women or men, and it really just was him trying to have friends and go to school and get good grades, and then also balance this life with Spider-Man, with his superpowers, and it really just was I understand why Spider-Man resonated so well with fans right away back in 1963 when Amazing Fantasy 15 came out, because he just represents a character, an everyman character, the character that we can relate to, the character that we root for. The guy that has the moral high ground. He is a hero. He will do whatever it takes to save people, and even to save the villains. I think that one of the greatest things about what Ultimate Spider-Man did is, come full circle to 2017, and Spider-Man: Homecoming takes a lot of its cues from that comic series, which I think is what makes it a good movie. I mean, I did a podcast a little while ago about my top things of 2017, and I mentioned that I thought that the Ultimate Spider-Man comic book and the Ultimate Universe in general was used as a strong base and a strong foundation for the building of a cinematic Spider-Man. And it's just great. I mean, that comic stayed entertaining from issue 1 all the way until its end, in different volumes and different iterations, and even a different character as Spider-Man in Miles Morales. It just really, really never let you down, and Bendis was on the top of his game, and Bagley, who had drawn Amazing Spider-Man for so long throughout the 90s, got to continue doing that and got to help design the villains from the ground up, design the Green Goblin, design Dr. Octopus and Electro and Kingpin and all of these characters. And it was just a fantastic read all throughout. There was not a story within that, ongoing comic series. There was not a story arc that was bad. Every story arc left you feeling hopeful about the future, and really just entertained you throughout. Even the ones where they were clearly just having a laugh at themselves or at the continuity of their comic universe, those arcs were still really amazing and really, really fun to read. Ultimate Spider-Man was obviously the first, but it springboarded from there into, an Ultimate Marvel team-up book with Spider-Man and various other heroes, an Ultimate X-Men book, an Ultimates book, which was basically their version of the Avengers, an Ultimate Fantastic Four book, a Daredevil miniseries, Iron Man miniseries, Hulk miniseries. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And as someone who wanted nothing more than to be able to watch this bloom and be built from the ground up. I mean, I have read and bought every Ultimate comic that has ever been printed, and it still entertains me to this day. So I want to switch it over to the world of video games, and whoever you were as a kid, were you a Nintendo kid? Were you a Sony kid? This was the era when the lines were really, really drawn in the sand, because Sega had kind of fallen out of the game by that point. Not fallen out of the game, but the Dreamcast, was still something that was coming, or it's still something that was putting out games, but it just didn't have the staying power that when we got to 2001, 2002, we got the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, and really just Sega was outshined by those two systems. But in the year 2000, it was still very much are you a Sony kid or are you a Nintendo kid? And personally, I was both. I never owned a Sony PlayStation until much after the fact, but I had friends who had them. I mean, to the point where I would actually go out and buy games and say, well, I'm going to spend the night at your house this weekend and we're going to destroy this fighting game, whatever it might have been. Um, and so in my house, the big release of 2000 that just was so exciting and so on my radar was Perfect Dark from Rare, which was kind of an unofficial sequel to the GoldenEye game that they had made. And it was just fantastic. I mean, waiting for that game, the anticipation killed, and then finally getting my hands on it. It was everything that made GoldenEye great, with so many other things built upon it, like the multiplayer, having the ability to put bot characters in the game that had a specific thing that they did. This bot steals all the ammo. This bot doesn't use guns. And so you could have your 4 players and then add a number of bots that would just make for some of the most chaotic multiplayer battles with your friends sitting on your couch in your living room. And we had entirely too much fun with Perfect Dark, getting back into those angry moments that will end your friendships, where you walk right into a remote mine, your buddy's standing around the corner waiting for you, and man, it led to so many, you're looking at my screen type of arguments, and it was just fantastic gaming. I mean, when a game can leave that kind of impression and leave that kind of a lasting impression, I don't remember the last time I had that much fun playing a multiplayer game with friends right in my living room. In this day and age, it's all online, and it seems to lose something when you can't berate your buddy sitting right next to you about the false, or about the terrible, controls and the terrible ability he has to outthink you. And it was just really fun. I mean, it was some of the best gaming of my life. And GoldenEye was right behind it. I mean, Perfect Dark outshined GoldenEye in every way. Even outside the multiplayer, it had a fantastic single-player story that just engaged you, and it had aliens. You went to Area 51. You met a cool little alien guy. He went on missions with you. His name was Elvis. I mean, it was just great. The humor and the poking fun at GoldenEye and itself, it was just a fantastic gaming experience that, I mean, still to this day, I think has yet to be, undone in the same way. I mean, we have fabulous multiplayer games where we're online and we play with 60 people, but nothing compares to that sitting in your living room and getting your 3 buddies, bringing their controllers along, and just doing Perfect Dark death matches all night. It was the best. So far be it for me to leave out the PlayStation, because as much as I was a Nintendo kid, I definitely loved PlayStation and some of the things it brought to the table. And the exclusivity kept me going back to it, because at the time, Final Fantasy, which had been a Nintendo staple up to the Nintendo 64 era, had now become a PlayStation exclusive. And, we all remember Final Fantasy VII fondly, and even Final Fantasy VIII to a lesser extent, but in the year 2000, we were excited about Final Fantasy IX. I know I was, because it represented a return to form, a return to those classic Super Nintendo Final Fantasy games that I just loved playing so much. The characters were the squatty, deformed characters that we remember. The class system came back, where everybody had a specific thing that they could do. Not everybody could do everything, so you had to really think about the party that you were going to put together before you went into that boss battle. Do you need black magic? Do you need healing magic? It also went back to, a 4-character team. Which typically, with 7 and with 8, they went to 3, where you just had 3 characters, and any of them could really do anything. The materia system allowed anybody to be a healer or anybody to be a black mage, and 8 introduced the junction system, which also allowed anybody to really do anything. You could draw your magic, and you could put that magic on whichever character you wanted to. But 9 went back to a time of challenge for Final Fantasy, where the strategy and the planning became the thing you were really focused on, because you had to think about what that team would be going into that next dungeon. You had to, because if you didn't and you took the wrong person, you were going to have a hard time getting back to a point where you could switch them out again, because you could only do that at save points and on the overworld map. So when you went into town or into that dungeon, you were stuck with what you had, and you better hope it was what you needed. And I 7 and 8 were fine games, but I just missed that about Final Fantasy. I missed that I had my thief, and I had my summoner, and I had my healer, and I had my black mage, and I had my warrior, had my dragoon knight, and it just really, really was a great, great classic Final Fantasy game brought into the PlayStation era. And I still remember the cutscenes and the story so fondly. And one cutscene that always stood out to me, and I still remember, quite fondly, is the moment when Alexander fights Bahamut. And Alexander is the castle that Garnet lives in, and Bahamut is summoned by the Black Mages and her mother, and it's just a epic CGI cutscene that shows a big giant castle guardian that is literally made out of the castle. The castle literally comes to life and is the guardian, and a dragon that breathes fire down from the heavens. I mean, it's just an epic clash that will stick with me long, long into the future. And I know we did movies. We did X-Men. Another movie that had popped up, for years before that, we had been wowed by fans as Batman the Animated Series. And then loved when they moved into Batman Beyond, and we got to see Terry McGinnis and an old Bruce Wayne in the future. And that had become, Batman Beyond had become one of my favorite shows up to that point. Well, 2000 saw the straight-to-video release of Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. And if you're unfamiliar, this was the first time they did a feature-length Batman Beyond story. And, through some genetic manipulation, the Joker had implanted his persona within a character from the Bat family. It was Grayson. No, it was not Grayson. It was Drake, I believe. And it's been a long time since I've seen the film, but it didn't matter. He managed to through some genetic manipulation, implant his persona in one of these characters, and they had like a Jekyll and Hyde thing where they would, become the Joker, and they brought Mark Hamill back to do the voice of the Joker, and he takes over the Joker gang, which had become a big part of the Batman Beyond story. And if you were a Batman Beyond fan at the time, this was it. This was a moment when we got to see Terry deal with the kind of craziness that Bruce had to deal with. Terry had his own villains, and he had a great rogues gallery. But seeing the Joker come back was the first time we had a really classic Batman feel within the future universe. And Bruce is just as shocked by this as anybody, and we get a nice little flashback story. It was Tim Drake, because in the flashback story, the Joker and Harley kidnap Tim Drake and toxinize him and make him a little clone of the Joker, basically. And the latent psychological damage mixed with a little nanotech genetic copy of the Joker implanted in Tim's neck allowed the Joker to transcend his death, to plague Batman long into the future. And it was just a great, exciting ride the whole time. And it was, sad and it made you angry. And there was so much emotion attached to this movie because it was just such a tragic story for Tim to have to live this life. And we got to see how the Batman family fell apart in the aftermath of Batman the Animated Series. And things just did not go their way. And they wondered to themselves if this is the life they should be leading, or if there wasn't more that they could do. Barbara and Grayson and Tim Drake, all of these people wondered about their future and ended up having to turn their backs on Batman. And it was just tragic to see. It was tragic to see Bruce as an old man and Grayson as an old man and Drake as an old man having these conversations and trying to come to terms with things that they really didn't ever come to terms with in their entire lives. And it was just a really, really, really amazing episode of Batman Beyond. And it stands the test of time. To this day, I don't know any child that couldn't watch the movie and be engaged. I remember showing it to my little brothers and sisters, and my little brothers, I guess, specifically, because the girls were a little younger at that point, but they enjoy it as well. And it stands the test of time. It is one of those movies that I will go to all the time when I'm looking for a good Batman Beyond fix. So that's going to bring us to the end of my retro episode. Keep your ears out in the future because I am going to do these. We're going to try to get some people to come on the show, and we'll have a discussion about what we were excited about in these particular eras of our lives, the things that really excited us. Because as much as there's so much to look forward to today, there wasn't as much to look forward to then when it comes to movies about comic characters and video games about comic characters and TV shows about comic characters. We really didn't have a lot of that. So it's an interesting thing, I think, to look back and see what little we had to grasp at that still excited us and still made us want to buy that next book or that next video game or watch that next movie. So we're going to be doing this a little, sporadically in the future. We'll bring in one of these episodes every now and again. But I hope you enjoyed listening. Thanks for sitting around and listening to me babble. If you like what we're putting down, do me a favor, head on over to entertainthegeeky.com. We got the blog up there. We got the Nerd News blurbs. We're trying to keep you as up to date as we can, up to the minute, the news as it happens. Chris, Roger, and myself, we're doing a lot of things. We're trying to bring as much information as we can to you and keep you as informed as you want to be in this time of so many things nerdy that we love. Check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky, on Twitter at entertaingeeky. And if you'd like to chat with me and let me know what you think of the show or expand on a discussion that I have, hit me up with email at etgnerdnews@gmail.com. And like I said, thanks for listening, and stay geeky out there, guys.